Bad News Boys. Is that the name of a band? The Bad News Boys? That sounds like the name of a band or something. I don't know. Um, uh, yeah, so Bad News Guys, yeah, you know? And others, people of all the genders and shit, and all that. Um, the DID question will remain unanswered. No one really knows what I have or if I have it. I mean, um, yeah. So, you know, like, uh, so I talked to my doctor, right? And, um, sorry, I have to talk to Beastie. I have to tell him I'm making a video again. Okay, I talked to my doctor and he told me like basically like you might have it but I'm not going to diagnose you. He said he's never diagnosed anyone with it, DID, and he's skeptical that it even exists, which I know that's a thing. Like it is actually kind of controversial in the medical community. I believe in it. Um but you know, uh I'm not actually a medical professional, so my opinion isn't really that big of a deal. And it's not like the vast majority say that it's not real. It's more like it seems kind of like a 50-50 kind of thing, but I don't really know because I'm not really in medical professional circles. Do you know what I mean? So, um, yeah, but that being said, I'm gonna still continue to live a plural lifestyle in my in my private life. Uh, I don't know what I'm gonna do with the channel, like as far as if I'm gonna start telling you guys when I'm like in a different kind of um head, like if I'm a different headmate. That's what they're called, I guess. That's like the term that I don't know what to do with terminology. Like, okay, so I've learned about this thing called tulpas, which is like it's kind of like having DID except um you don't it's similar to it, but you don't actually have like a mental illness, and it's not like as a result of trauma or anything like that. And I still think it's uncertain whether or not I have trauma, because like I recently learned from my psychology teacher that like if you're getting yelled at like super often by um a parent or just like any kind of guardian, that can be traumatizing, like it will put your body in a fight or flight state. And, if that keeps happening over and over again, that can cause like your brain to not grow, correctly. So, that certainly happened to me as a kid, with my mom, uh, getting yelled at like very, 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 very frequently. I definitely was put in a state of fight or flight very often. So, yeah, but like, I don't know. I don't know. Um, so, but tulpas are like a thing where, I'm gonna make another video about that, about the whole tulpa thing. It's like, it's kind of apparently, it's, a, like, a kind of westernized version of a Tibetan Buddhist practice, as far as I can tell, but I need to like research the accuracy of that. Like I was reading an article about it, but it's very long, so I decided I'm gonna like make my own video, like actually reading the whole thing instead of just reading it in my free time, because I think that like I don't know, that seems like a good way of doing it. I think it would be better than me just trying to summarize it, because I might not like leave in all the like critical information. So yeah, but also I want to just say, like, my doctor was kind of transphobic to me. Like, yeah. He, like, we were talking about how, so I guess I'll just kind of casually drop a fucking, thing on you. So, like, I've had, eating disorder behavior before. I've kind of alluded to it before, and, like, yeah, it's just a thing, you know? Um, the reason why I'm, like, kind of, like, um, chunkier now and kind of thick or whatever you want to call it, um, is like it's because of like my recovery from like a time where I was like under eating like almost every day and stuff. So yeah, uh but anyway, like so I told my doctor about that, and I told him about Uh, and yeah. And like, so, and for context, I should also tell you that, like, this is my second time meeting him because he's a new doctor. He replaced my old doctor. Um, and, like, so the first time I met him, he asked me to tell him about myself. And I told him about myself, and, you know, the first thing I brought up was my gender because, like, when you're trans, and even my mom understood this, and she's not always the most supportive person or the best ally, but even she understood this when I told her about what I'm gonna tell you about, like, you know, this whole thing. But um, when I introduced myself to him, I talked about my gender first and foremost because when you're trans, it's like you don't always let you can't people don't always know what they don't know, you know, like just by looking at you because like I'm pre-transition and everything, and so it's like people just yeah, I don't want to be misgendered, right? Like that's an uncomfortable thing. It's understood to be a very uncomfortable thing for a transgender person usually. So I wanted to like let him know, you know, cuz he's my doctor and I should be able to trust him and everything. But anyway, so um told him about that, and flash forward or whatever to this second time meeting him, and he's telling me, he's like, so I don't know if you have DID, but you certainly do have some identity issues. Because like, you know, for one, there's the whole eating disorder thing, which I won't argue with that. Like that's fair. That might be an identity issue or whatever. Sure. But like he also said, and then also he said also, remember when we were talking for the first time and I asked you to tell me about yourself? And I said, yeah. And he's like, what did you tell me? And then I talked about the things that I talked about, you know, the things I told him about myself, and one of them, of course, was my gender. And he's like, yeah, you brought up, the very first thing you brought up was this gender stuff. And I was like, yeah, I'm sorry, is that a problem? Or whatever. I didn't actually use that wording. I was like, I just don't know. I don't get why you think of that as like a gender issue, or an identity problem, an identity issue. There was a word he used, something like dysfunction or something, like some kind of like what's it called, pathologizing term, you know. And so I was like, I just, of course, you know, I questioned him. I was like, what do you mean? Like, how is that a problem, basically, is what I said, you know, essentially. And he's like, well, it's not a problem, it's just, it's not, like, it's not common. And I was like, or something like that. And I don't know, I argued with him, and he was like, you know, he said, it's new. That's what he said. He said it's new. And I was like, no, it's not. Because it's not, you know? Trans people have existed since the beginning of humanity. And he said, well, the prevalence of it is. And I just gave up by that point. But for y'all to just understand here, the prevalence of transgender people nowadays, a lot of it just has to do with progress, social progress. Like, you know, obviously we're still not, like, by and large accepted or treated equally by, you know, society at large, but, you know, we're more visible now, and that even comes with its own problems, but, you know, we are, like, less in the dark now, and there, like, at the very least, like, more people than before have the language to describe these experiences, um and this, like, you know, this life that they have, this identity, and all that. So, like, yeah, it's not a matter of, like, it just being trendy. I mean, I guess in some circles it kind of is, but, like, yeah, like, there is, like, okay, because of it now being more, like, socially, not, like, actually socially acceptable, obviously, but more socially acceptable than before, and now that it's become more understood and talked about than before, that's going to cause a lot more people to truly know that they're trans and actually be trans and transition and be happy with it. But it's going to also cause more people to be to just, you know, to be mistaken, you know, like, they'll detransition, or they'll, like, you know, they'll socially and or, like, medically detransition or whatever, you know, they'll be confused, or whatever you want to call it. So, yeah, like, that is a consequence of this, but it's not like that's the majority of people at all. Like, there are studies to prove it. Like, this is a bad look for me to just kind of reference them and not show you them, but, like, they're out there, like, this is understood. The queer community, we know, like, we know that the majority of people who transition do not detransition and stuff like that. Like, most people who say they're trans are in fact trans, you know? Not all trans people do transition, by the way, but, I'm just saying, the regret in general, is vastly exaggerated, you know, overblown and all that. So, yeah, like, so yeah, it really did fuck with me that he said all that stuff, and then he tried to backpedal after I tried to, you know, express my horror, at what he was saying, and he was like, well, I tried to treat he didn't really take a tone with me or anything, but he did say some shit that was, like, it seemed like posturing or whatever, like, he was like, I try to treat everybody with dignity and respect, and I don't care I don't care, you know, about what you are or who you are or anything like that. Like, I just, you know, all this stuff, like, just trying to make himself look like the good guy or whatever, but, you know, I feel like he's talking the talk and he's just not walking the walk, you know? Like, he doesn't even, like, when he says he doesn't care, I believe him. He doesn't care. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Doesn't care enough to educate himself on this stuff that he doesn't understand, you know? That's a problem. He's my doctor, you know? Like, I don't really care what people think usually. I'm kind of, like, slowly but steadily developing thicker skin, I would say. But, like, when it's a medical professional that, like, has your back or whatever, or should have your back and should be there for you and everything, it's like, that's not ideal at all, you know? That's not good, right? So yeah, it's a bit worrying, and it wasn't great, you know, to go through that. So yeah, he's just not being all that helpful, but he at least, I mean, he's not useless, right? Like, he also changed my prescription, so now I'm gonna start taking, instead of, like, okay, so before I was on two low doses, two different antidepressants, both at low doses, and he looked at that and he was like, that's weird, right? like, instead of being on these two, um, like, well, I forget the word he used. It was like borderline therapeutic doses of these two different prescriptions. Why don't we just put you on like an actually like effective dose of just one of them, you know? And I was like, yeah, that sounds reasonable. So now I'm going to be instead of taking a low dose of Prozac and a low dose of Wellbutrin, I'm going to just be taking a like medium high dose of Wellbutrin or something like that, you know? So yeah, and that's a good thing. So, you know, he's not useless as a doctor, but you know, he's not great. I kind of miss my old doctor now. Like, I wasn't so happy with my old doctor, Dr. Finn, but now I kind of miss him because he didn't do that bullshit, you know? And this isn't the first time that this doctor has, like, this new doctor, Dr. Moore, has said anything offensive to me, like, to my face or whatever. Like, so there was this one time where I was talking about my mom and how she's, the ways that she kind of weaponizes her emotions and doesn't like try to just contain herself when it's necessary, and how she also can be very like quick about shifting her emotions. Like, she'll just be screaming and like crying and like exploding one minute, and then the next minute she'll be acting like nothing happened, and how I find that very like disorienting and confusing and like strange and all that. And so I told him about this, and he was like, yeah, I know how that can be. I live with a woman too, you know? And that was wild, man. Like, there was a woman in the room, right? Like, I'm pretty sure my therapist Sarah was in the room at the time. So that was crazy, you know? Men will just do stuff like men, especially cis het men, they will just say things, you know? Just say stuff, like, without thinking. They'll just do it. They'll just do it, you know? They don't care. They don't care. It's wild. So, yeah, I'm not so happy about this guy. Yeah, he just seems like a real boomer. Like, I don't think he's an absolute monster, but he's a boomer for sure. Um, like, he's kind of friendly, you know? He tries to, like, make polite conversation with me and tries to, like, I would say he probably means well. You know, like most people do. Like, I don't think that that's particularly, like, special. It's not a special trait to mean well, right? That to have good intentions isn't a very like remarkable quality. I just think it's worth something, though. You know what I mean? It's worth saying, it's worth acknowledging, but at the same time, it's also worth acknowledging that like it doesn't make him like any kind of like particularly respectable individual. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a thing. It's just a thing, really. So yeah. Okay, I think that's all I have to say then. I just wanted to talk about that. And I'll talk to you guys about tulpas more. Maybe I'll make the tulpa video today or tomorrow or on the weekend or something. I don't know, but probably soon. So yeah. Bye guys, love you.